What up, everybody, and welcome to Baz on Blades. My name is Baz, and I talk about blades. Today, you see, we have a special guest here at Baz on Blades. It's Mr. Blue Moon, and the reason Mr. Blue Moon is here, he doesn't really have any input on the knife we're going to talk about today, but I just finished a 6-day work week, and on the very last night of the week, I pulled a muscle in my back, and just like all doctors, I have chosen to self-medicate. I have prescribed to myself that I should take an undisclosed amount of this Blue Moon and go to sleep, and hopefully everything will be better tomorrow. So I hope that this does not impact my review. If I get loosey-goosey, then good for you guys and gals. So what we're going to talk about today and feature is a new product from Ganzo Firebird. What we've got here is the brand new, for the very end of 2018. I think today is December the 20-something or another. You lose track of the days when you work 6 days a week, and all you do is work, eat, and sleep. But it is the very end of December. This may be the last folder review of 2018 for Baz on Blades. And seriously, we're going to have to move Mr. Blue Moon out of here, or I'm going to knock him over and make a big mess. But, man, what we've got here is a brand new release. As soon as this dropped to Power Cutlery, I jumped on it with both feet because I really did like the look at this. Look of this, and I was so very much impressed, as you guys and gals know, with the last release, the FH11, and this looked like it was just going to be a continuation of this new build style, new blade steel in D2 tool steel, and just a new direction for Ganzo Firebird. And I'm going to save everybody a lot of time and do a sort of virtual fast forward to the end of the video and say, this knife is awesome. You know, I'm really getting tired of reviewing Ganzo knives here lately, because it seems like every review I do, I always say the same thing. Well, this is the best Ganzo yet. This is the best Ganzo ever. Ganzo just gets better and better and better. And you know what? I'm going to say some of that crap again, but without that sort of stupid accent on it, because this is such a great knife. And this is the FH21, if I did not say that because I was just talking about my beer. But what we got here is the brand new, for the very end of 2018, FH21. Let's go ahead and we'll set him down very quickly here. We'll bring in some packaging, standard Ganzo Firebird packaging. We'll take a look at the label. This is the FH21-GY. And the GY in this instance stands for gray, what they are calling gray G10, even though it looks blue to me, and I'm sure it will to most of you. And I did pick this up at Power Cutlery, and they are carrying this knife for $23.99. And I'm going to tell you, that is a heck of a deal on this knife. Just like the FH11 before it, this knife is really sort of a change in direction for Ganzo Firebird, and it's very much appreciated here at Baz on Blades. Now, let's knock some numbers out very quickly. We'll go over the specs. This is an EDC size knife, so it hits that sort of sweet spot for EDC carry. You're looking at a 3 3/8 inch blade length, and that is about 8.5 centimeters. Blade stock thickness, very good, 3.5 millimeters, or 138 thousandths of an inch. The blade width, it's a fairly narrow blade profile at 0.88 of an inch, almost 9/10 of an inch, or 22.3 millimeters. The handle length, a good length again for EDC, 4 3/8 of an inch, or 11 centimeters. Your handle thickness is 0.54 of an inch, or 13.7 millimeters. Your handle width at the pivot is 0.96 of an inch, just shy of an inch, or 24.5 millimeters. The closed width, including the flipper tab, again is fairly narrow and easy to carry, 1.2 inches or 30.5 millimeters. Overall length is 7.75 inches or 19.5 centimeters. Your stop pin diameter is 118 thousandths of an inch or 3 millimeters. Behind the edge on this flat ground, very high, not totally flat ground, but very high flat ground edge is very thin and very slicey. I hit this knife in 3 spots and it went from 19 thousandths of an inch to 20 thousandths. Very consistent, and that averages about 0.48 millimeters. Your handle to blade ratio, a very good 0.77, and your weight, an easy to pocket and comfortable to carry, 3.42 ounces or 97 grams. Now, this is a very good looking knife. Now, you notice that when we showed the packaging, I said that this is supposed to be gray. I'm going to bring another knife in here that a lot of you will be familiar with, released this year from Kershaw, and that is the Natrix carbon fiber. And you know that the G10 on it is sort of a slate blue, and you can see here they are pretty much the same exact thing. You might see a little variation. I think that is more in just perceived because of the finish on it, the way it's machined. So it is more of a slate blue than it is a gray, but it is very attractive. It's a color of G10 I have only seen on the production market a couple of times. It's just very, very attractive. So, Baz on Blades, let's talk about this knife a little bit. Again, what we've got in this model is a continuation of the FH11, and we've got D2 tool steel for our blade steel. Most of you are familiar with D2. It is a high carbon, high chromium, semi-stainless tool steel. You will typically see it rock weld in the 60 to 62 range, and Ganzo Firebird's D2 has been tested at 62 rock weld, so it's very hard. You've got a high carbon content, like I said, of 1.5 to 1.6%, a chromium content of 11.5 to 12%, and it is a vanadium alloyed steel. Vanadium, again, is a carbide former, and it has a vanadium content of 0.9 to 1.1%. What you will find in D2 tool steel, your edge retention or wear resistance is very good. D2 will take a toothy razor edge. It will hold that edge a respectable amount of time, but when it goes down to a working edge, it will hold a working edge for a very long time. As far as toughness or impact resistance, it's good. D2 can be a little chippy if the edge is ground too thin or too hot. And so you don't want to use it in high impact environments. Corrosion resistance, again, it is semi-stainless. It misses the stainless designator by 1.5% of chromium. I find D2 to be plenty stainless enough with just a modicum of care. Now, material-wise in your handle, again, we've got this machine G10, and it is slate blue. And it is radially machined. Let's see if we can get that to focus here. You can see it is radially machined. It does have this ball milled sort of shooting star pattern that is centered around the pivot here. Very cleanly machined. Let's take a very close look at it. Very cleanly machined. You've got a G10 backspacer in black, which I very much like G10 as a backspacer material. You've got stainless small parts in your pivot, your screws, and deep carry pocket clip, the same pocket clip that was on the FH11. So very respectable materials for a knife that's $23.99, guys. Ganzo, love them or hate them, you really have to admit that this is a little more than competitive as far as the budget arena goes. These are pretty much the best budget knives, just going by materials and fit and finish, that are out there at the price point. Now, speaking of fit and finish, let's go back to the blade here. You've got this high flat grind, and I want you to look at the way that the light reflects on this grind. You don't see any dips, rough grind on it. The edge is super even from tip to heel, and that is on both sides, guys. It's got a really sharp forward raked plunge grind, and you'll notice that you've got a sharpening choil here. It does extend past the plunge grind. That sharp crisp plunge line makes it easier to work in a sharpening choil, as you don't have the big wide flaring soft plunge grind you've got to work all the way through. So the grinds, this satin grind, guys, is just super clean. I hope that is, you're picking that up in the video here. It is a very high flat grind. It does have a swedge that extends 2/3 of the length of the blade, and you've got the Ganzo Firebird, the actual Firebird marking on the front, your only front marking. You do have a section of very good jimping. Look at how deep that fine jimping is. It's flat top for comfort, but it's nice and deep, so if you put some pressure on it, the flesh of your finger gets down in it, and it's really good jimping, guys. Then on the back of the blade, you've got your standard sort of Ganzo markings here with your Firebird, your model name, and your steel designator made by Ganzo. So the fit and finish on the blade, guys, you know what? I think it's better than the FH11 was. It is definitely, my example has absolutely the best fit and finish of any Ganzo knife that I have had come through my hands. And if you go back through my video library, there have been plenty gone through my hands. It's just very well done. Now you go into the handle here, this radially machined G10, guys, again with this ball milled sort of shooting star pattern centered around the pivot here. It is, I mean, let's just take another close look at this. Look at this, guys. Are you seeing anything that is just not perfectly machined? There's, I mean, the only machining marks are what you are, they're becoming classic on these modern machine G10 handle scales that we see across multiple manufacturers. You can see machining marks that are purposefully left there as sort of a micro texture. But I mean, look at this G10 backspacer. I love G10 as a backspacer because it is the same color all the way through. The reason I do not like aluminum as a backspacer, because aluminum typically has a hard coat anodization on it, which once it wears away, very easily I might add, you will see the raw aluminum. It's a very worn look, but as this G10 gets scuffed, it's just going to be black all the way through. Again, on this back side, you can look here. The fit and finish on this knife is fabulous. At twice the price, it would still be fabulous, guys. The small parts, the stainless small parts, you've got a pivot that was just like what is on the FH11, the flattened dome pivot hardware here. It is two-sided. The same deep carry pocket clip with pretty much a mirror polish on it, and some surprisingly very good T6 hardware here, Torx hardware for the body screws. The sockets on these T6 screws, now I can't tell you, I'm not a screw expert like a lot of reviewers. I can't tell, You know, if it strips out, I'm like, okay, well, that's some crappy screws. But if they feel good, I'm like, okay, well, that's some good screws. I don't know how hard they are or anything. But these have very deeply socketed and very good feeling, guys. It features a liner lock with, again, just like the FH11, recessed, hidden, pocketed, or whatever kind of liners you want to call them, but they are sitting in milled pockets on the inside of that G10. You can see here the liners are not weight relieved, but again, the knife is 3.4 ounces or 97 grams. Really, how much lighter do you need it than that? If you really need to go lighter than that, you need to get you a good sharpening kit. You get you a big feather, and you sharpen the edges of that feather, and you carry the sharpened feather in your pocket. You will never feel it's there, and you're welcome, because that's some great advice from Baz on Blades for an ultralight carry. But in the real world, 3.4 ounces or 97 grams in a knife that's a 3.4 inch blade length and what we say, almost 8 inches, 7 3/4 inches overall. That's an excellent weight to size ratio, guys. That is within the 1 ounce per inch of blade length that we all like to see. Now, action-wise, we're going to do some talking here as far as action goes. When the FH11 came out, there were some great examples and some not so good examples of how to tune a detent on a flipper folder. And just like the FH11, this knife is built on the single row steel bearing pivot, and it has the same type of, really super smooth action, guys. But this knife is a little different than the FH11, and that difference is it's just better. It's a better flipper, and that has to do with a more finely tuned, at least in my example, detent. It's a little stouter detent, and it has to do with what is quite possibly the absolute best flipper tab design I have ever seen on one of these budget knives. I want you to look, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes and talk about detent and flipper action and flipper tabs. And I'm going to do a longer video on this later, talking about the mechanics of a flipper. But it doesn't just have to do with how stout the detent is. How hard that detent holds has to do with the amount of kinetic energy that it will retain before it breaks free. Sure, but that is not the only thing that makes a good detent. In a knife like this, the design of the flipper tab also has a great deal to do with how well the detent works. And I want you to look at this flipper tab. In relation to the pivot, the center point of the pivot, and that is your rotational point for the blade, the center point of the pivot. You will notice in different flipper designs, we'll bring the FH11 here. Let's take a look at the flipper on it. You go from the center point of the pivot straight up into a straight up and down vertical pivot design. Not pivot design, flipper tab design. I'm sorry, guys. But in the FH21, what you've got here, you come straight up on the vertical plane from the pivot center point, and you see that the flipper tab is forward of that point, and it is an angled flipper tab that is oriented forward. And what that does is, in conjunction with the detent, what you have created here is a mechanically efficient flipper design. And then on top of that, you have got what has just got to be one of the best shaped flipper tabs. You go to this flipper tab and your finger goes straight to this flat portion that has very good detent, has very good jimping on it. I'm sorry, guys. and you go right to that flat point, and what you're going to do is a modified flipper action that is a combination of a button push straight down and a light switch coming back. And what we're going to do is basically we're going to push in line with this angle, and that improves the mechanical efficiency of this design. And guys, this thing flips so well. In fact, going into the end of the year here, this knife would probably be in competition at Baz on Blades for best flipper of the year. And it doesn't have a super stout detent. It's just got a good detent and an excellent flipper tab design. And the combination of those two, it is a super fine flipper. For those of you that did not care for the soft flipper action on the FH11, this is much improved, and it's about the same size as the FH11, maybe, you know, a 1/16 of an inch shorter in the blade and an 1/8 of an inch in the handle. And I've got some comparisons out here we're going to look at towards the end of the video. So as far as the flipping action, fabulous, guys. If I said that it was fabulous or fantastic or great or awesome or anything, that's exactly what it is. The bearing action, this is a new knife. It has not broken in. I have not adjusted it at all. Nothing. I've not cleaned it or anything, and it feels just super smooth, guys. This knife, just like my FH11s, I think will be within just a few days, or maybe a cleaning or a couple of drops of oil, will be drop shut smooth. It feels that good. Now, as far as centering, let's look here. We're straight down the middle as far as the centering goes. Very good there. Lockup on mine, it is a little deceiving. The lockup is probably about 25% and very solid. No lateral or radial play in that lockup at all, and plenty of room to move a little bit over the lifetime of the knife. So as far as action goes, it's just great, guys. It's great for a knife that's less than $25. Now, ergos and utility. Well, I mean, really, let's take a look at this blade. What we've got here is a drop point spear-shaped blade. You've got a good amount of belly. I would say that 60% of the cutting edge is belly. You have a short section of flat edge here. Like I said, the thickness behind the edge, 19 to 20 thousandths of an inch. That's crazy, guys. That's actually better than a paramilitary 2. They typically go 20, 22, 23 thousandths of an inch behind the edge. It's a very slicey, flat grind. And you know what? That's just a utilitarian drop point blade profile with a nice piercy point in it that instantly catches with very minimal pressure and have no problem penetrating in a stabbing or piercing motion. You've got this swedge here that, if you look at the back profile, it does thin down the spine of the blade, in the center of the blade here gives you more of the thickness of the blade stock at the tip for strength. And again, you've got this great jimping, guys. It is just so well done. That is good jimping. Now, it's not as good as a paramilitary 2, but it's pretty doggone good. And I think the utility use of this blade profile grind type, the edge grind is just, it's going to be very good for any type of slicing. Ergos on the handle. We're going to get into the one slight ding that this knife has, and it is a great example of a design aspect that is fantastic in one respect and maybe not so good in another, and that has to do with the flipper tab. And like I said, this flipper tab design, as far as mechanical efficiency and ease of use, is great. It makes this a fantastic flipper. But one of the things that make it such a great flipper is the jimping that is on this flat spot on this flipper tab, and it is just the perfect place for your finger. It is just a great design, but in the open position, that is going to be the inside edge of the flipper tab that works as sort of an extended guard in conjunction with this finger choil here. And what happens is, in a regular grip, you don't even feel it. If you have an aggressive thumb forward grip, which is a grip that I use predominantly in a folding knife or any knife really, what you're going to find is you're going to press straight up into this jimping. And if you use a very aggressive forward grip, that jimping is fairly crisply cut, and you can feel it. Now, if you're the type of person that is extremely sensitive to hot spots, you may not like that. But it is easy to modify or fix. You could disassemble this knife. You could take this blade and you just touch off the corners. I mean, just touch on them with a small diamond file just to break it. Not even enough to where you can see that you've done it. Just enough to break that crispness. And it would be perfectly fine at that point. But it is something that I have to tell you guys about. Now, as far as ergos in the handle, it's, you know what? It's a pretty basic handle design, even though it doesn't look so basic. What you've got here is a moderate finger choil, and it does have sort of a raky, sort of abstract-y cut to it. And it's perfectly comfortable, no issues there. You've got an ergonomic drop spine of the handle here, a nice wide open center design of the handle, a slight bird's beak at the butt end here, a nice flat two-section flat to butt cap the end in a reverse grip. I find that it doesn't have that sort of melt in your hand type of feel, but it is comfortable in multiple grips, and it works very well for me. But it is a little stylized, and the more you make a handle stylized, the more the better chance that it has to have some hot spots in different hands, because not all hands are the same. I'm going to say that, you know, for an EDC type knife, you're not going to be super hard using and gripping it like a bear, you know, and doing things you shouldn't do with a folder anyway. I'm going to say that it's perfectly fine. It is attractive. So no issues there. I think overall, as far as ergos and utility, while it is not absolutely perfect, it is very, very good. And again, taking into account the price point, the materials, the fit and finish on it, I just think that this knife is a winner. And we're going to set it down quickly here, if we can get it all in the frame. It looks so big that way. We're going to bring in the FH11 here on the left side of it, and you can take a look. It is just barely bigger. We're going to bring in a new standard, and that is the Kershaw bare knuckle. You can see it is, again, slightly bigger. We'll bring in the Paramilitary 2, everybody's standard, and of course the Paramilitary 2 is about the same blade length, give or take about 1/8 of an inch, but is a little bit longer in the handle, as the PM2 is handle heavy anyway. And then we're going to bring back in that Kershaw Natrix here. So you got a good idea. If I've got these all in the frame, guys, I apologize if I don't. This is the first time of me laying these out this way. But that gives you a good idea as far as the size goes, with some very popular options and some new options that everybody has been looking at lately. So, Baz on Blades, what about this Ganzo Firebird FH21? You know what? I'm just going to say it. It's, you know, probably the best Ganzo ever until the next Ganzo, which will be the best Ganzo ever. It is on par and a slight improvement over the FH11 in fit and finish, in action. It's a little more stylized for those of you that like that. Again, the flipper action on this knife is absolutely, it's just great, guys. It's a fantastic flipper, and I can't wait till this thing breaks in and it's fall shutty, sort of smooth like my FH11 is, because every time I take one of these Ganzo knives out, these new Ganzos, and I think, you know what, I just paid $23 for this knife, it makes me smile. And even if you are not a fan of Ganzo Firebird's business practices in the past, where they were just copying knives from other manufacturers, I think if you were honest, you would have to look at this and go, you know what, that's a lot of knife for $23.99. And it is a lot of knife for $23.99, guys, and it just flips so good. Yeah, good Lord. That just flips so good, guys. It is everything in a flipper we wanted the FH11 to be. All right, let's get this thing closed out. I think I have overprescribed myself on Mr. Blue Moon here, and I've got a little talkative, which I usually am, so let's not make any excuses. Go out and get this knife. Buy it from Power Cutlery if it's in stock. If it's not, wait for it to be in stock and get you one. I believe they're available also in black G10 and I think OD green G10. But this is a very attractive color. You do not see that often, so it is a great option. All right, as always, I thank you for taking the time to watch one of my long videos. God bless all of you, and we will talk to you again.